In a bustling courtroom early on a weekday morning, Judge Harold Thompson was preparing for another day filled with cases. Known for his fair-mindedness and gentle humor, he approached each session with the aim to deliver justice, not just by the letter of the law, but with humanity. This particular morning, among the first to appear was Rachel Simmons, a young mother of two. By her side were her daughters, Savannah, an observant and thoughtful 7-year-old, and Iris, a lively 5-year-old who loved being the center of attention. Judge Thompson welcomed them warmly, his curiosity piqued at the sight of such young children in his courtroom. He had no idea that these two little girls would become the heart of a memorable morning, one that was destined to be filled with innocence, honesty, and a surprising dose of justice. Judge Thompson, seated at his bench, glanced at the docket for the day. It was filled with traffic violations and minor offenses, typical cases that were usually straightforward. However, as Rachel and her daughters approached, he could tell this was going to be different. Rachel appeared calm but slightly apprehensive, while her daughters clung to her sides, their eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The judge decided to address the children first, his warm smile breaking the stiffness of the courtroom. "Good morning, young ladies. Who might you be?" Judge Thompson asked, his voice light and friendly. Savannah stepped forward with all the poise her 7 years could muster. "I'm Savannah, and this is my sister, Iris," she announced, her small voice carrying across the courtroom. Iris, not to be left out, beamed up at the judge, waving enthusiastically. Judge Thompson chuckled softly, the warmth of the interaction drawing smiles from even the most serious faces in the room. "Well, Savannah and Iris, it's not every day that I get to meet such distinguished guests in my courtroom," he said, his eyes twinkling. Turning his attention to Rachel, he continued, "And what brings you and these charming young ladies here today, Mrs. Simmons?" Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes meeting the judge's. "Your Honor, I'm here because of a traffic violation. I'm accused of running a red light," she explained, her voice steady though her hands betrayed a slight tremor. Judge Thompson nodded, then looked at Savannah and Iris with an idea forming in his mind. "How would you two like to help me decide this case?" he asked, his tone playful but sincere. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, captivated by the unexpected turn of events. Savannah and Iris exchanged glances, their eyes widening in surprise. Slowly, they both nodded. "Yes, sir," they said in unison, their enthusiasm evident. And with that, the stage was set for a unique kind of justice, one led by innocence, empathy, and the unfiltered honesty that only children could provide. Little did anyone in that courtroom know, this ordinary traffic case would soon transform into a profound lesson on fairness, compassion, and the power of seeing the world through the eyes of a child. Judge Thompson greeted Rachel and her daughters with a warm smile. "Good morning, Rachel," he said, then turned his gaze to the two little girls standing beside her. "And who are these pretty young ladies?" Savannah, with her wide, inquisitive eyes, stepped forward and introduced herself and her sister, her voice filled with confidence. Judge Thompson couldn't help but chuckle at the formality and sweetness that radiated from them. He decided, in that very moment, to let them help with their mother's case. After all, what better way to make the courtroom a little less intimidating than by involving the innocent enthusiasm of children? Rachel was facing a charge for running a red light. According to the citation, she had crossed the intersection just a fraction of a second after the light had turned red. Judge Thompson took a deep breath and turned to Savannah and Iris, giving them a serious, almost conspiratorial look. "All right, girls, your mom is in a bit of trouble today. She's accused of running a red light. Now, what do you think? Should we give her a break, or should we make her pay the fine?" he asked with a playful but sincere tone, clearly enjoying the moment. Savannah, feeling the weight of her new responsibility, looked thoughtfully at the judge and then at her mother. There was a pause, a moment where she considered the situation carefully. Then, with a look of determination, she declared, "I think she should pay the fine." Her response brought a ripple of laughter through the courtroom. Rachel smiled at her daughter, shaking her head in mock disbelief, while Iris quickly chimed in, nodding vigorously and agreeing with her sister. It was clear that she wanted to prove that she understood the importance of fairness too. Judge Thompson nodded thoughtfully, playing along with the seriousness of the young judges. Well, that settles it then. 2 votes for the fine, he said, a twinkle in his eye. The courtroom was filled with light laughter, the tension lifting as everyone enjoyed this innocent moment. But the judge wasn't quite done yet. He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret with the girls. But before we make our final decision, why don't we watch the video of what happened? Maybe we'll see something that can change our minds. The lights dimmed slightly as a screen flickered on, displaying footage of Rachel's car approaching the intersection. Savannah and Iris watched intently, their faces serious as they focused on the video. The car came into view, and they could see the traffic lights switching from yellow to red just as their mother's vehicle crossed the line. Judge Thompson paused the video at the critical moment and looked at the 2 young girls. "All right, Savannah, Iris," he said, "here is where you get to be real judges. You saw the video. Did your mom stop like she was supposed to?" Savannah hesitated, glancing at Iris, who seemed unsure. There was a palpable silence in the courtroom as the girls considered their answer. Savannah turned to look at her mother, who gave her an encouraging smile. She took a deep breath and finally spoke. I think she almost stopped," she said, her voice softening. Iris, seeing her sister's uncertainty, nodded in agreement, her earlier confidence waning. Judge Thompson smiled gently, appreciating the honesty in Savannah's response. "Almost stopped? Huh? Well, sometimes almost isn't quite enough. But let me tell you something," he said, his tone warm and understanding. "Sometimes, even judges have to look beyond just the rules. We have to think about what's fair and what's right. Your mom was just a tiny bit late, wasn't she? Do you think she deserves a second chance?" Savannah and Iris exchanged glances, their earlier sternness replaced by empathy. Slowly, both girls nodded eagerly, their innocent sense of fairness now leaning towards mercy. "Yes, sir," they said in unison, their voices filled with conviction. The courtroom seemed to warm with their innocence, a sense of humanity cutting through the usual formality of the proceedings. Rachel looked at her daughters, her eyes glistening with pride. It was a small moment, but one that spoke volumes about the power of seeing the world through the eyes of a child, where fairness and compassion often take precedence over strict adherence to the rules. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. "All right then, I think we're going to let your mom off with a warning this time. But, Savannah, Iris," he said, looking at them with mock seriousness, "you have to promise me something. You have to make sure your mom is extra careful at those lights from now on, okay?" "Yes, sir," the girls responded, their faces lighting up with joy. The judge smiled and banged his gavel lightly. "Case dismissed. No fine today." The courtroom erupted in light applause, and Rachel let out a sigh of relief, smiling gratefully at her daughters and then at the judge. As they began to gather their things, Judge Thompson called out to them once more. "You know, Savannah and Iris, you've done such a good job today. I think you could stay and help me with another case. What do you say?" Savannah shook her head vigorously. "We have to go feed our rabbits," she said with utmost seriousness, drawing another round of laughter from the courtroom. Judge Thompson laughed along with everyone else, nodding his head. "Well, feeding rabbits is very important work. Thank you for your help today, ladies. You both did a wonderful job." With that, Rachel and her daughters left the courtroom, the atmosphere noticeably lighter. The rest of the courtroom attendees watched them go, smiles lingering on their faces. It was rare for a day in court to be filled with such warmth and innocence, and for a brief moment, everyone there was reminded of the true spirit of justice, not just about laws and penalties, but about fairness, understanding, and the power of a child's perspective to remind them all of what truly mattered. The video played, showing Rachel's car approaching the intersection. The courtroom was silent as everyone watched, the hum of the screen the only noise breaking the stillness. It was evident that the light had turned red just a split second before Rachel made it through. Judge Thompson paused the video at the critical moment, leaning forward with a thoughtful expression on his face. "All right, Savannah and Iris," he said, turning to the 2 young girls, "this is where you get to be real judges. You saw the video. Did your mom stop like she was supposed to?" Savannah hesitated for a moment, her small brow furrowed in concentration. She glanced at her younger sister, who simply shrugged her shoulders, clearly unsure of what to say. Savannah then looked back at her mom, who sat watching them with a patient smile. There was something about her mother's calm, trusting expression that gave Savannah a sense of responsibility. After a brief silence, Savannah turned back to the judge. I think she almost stopped," Savannah finally said, her voice softening as she spoke. Iris, sensing her sister's change of heart, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, almost," she added quietly. Judge Thompson smiled, a gentle expression of understanding crossing his face. "Almost stopped, huh?" he repeated, his eyes twinkling. He then leaned in a little closer, as if he were about to let the girls in on a secret. "Well, sometimes almost isn't quite enough," he said, his tone serious but kind. "But let me tell you something. Sometimes, even judges have to look at more than just the rules. We have to think about what's fair." He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "Your mom was just a tiny bit late, just a fraction of a second. Do you think she deserves a second chance?" Savannah looked at her sister, and the two shared a moment of silent communication. Iris gave a small nod, and Savannah's face softened into a smile. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice now filled with conviction. Iris echoed her sister, her earlier uncertainty replaced with enthusiasm. "Yes, sir," she said, a broad smile spreading across her face. The entire courtroom seemed to warm with the innocence of their response. There was something incredibly genuine about the way they spoke, their honesty cutting through the usual formality of the proceedings. Rachel's eyes glistened with pride as she looked at her daughters, her heart swelling at the sight of their empathy and willingness to forgive. Judge Thompson nodded approvingly. "All right then," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I think we're going to give your mom a second chance." He looked at Savannah and Iris with mock seriousness, pointing a finger at them. "But you two have to promise me something," he added. "You have to make sure your mom is extra careful at those lights from now on, okay?" Savannah and Iris nodded eagerly, their eyes wide with sincerity. "Yes, sir," they chimed together, their voices ringing through the courtroom. The judge smiled and gave his gavel a light tap. "Case dismissed. No fine today." A ripple of light applause filled the courtroom, a collective sigh of relief washing over everyone present. Rachel let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders relaxing as she smiled gratefully at her daughters and then at the judge. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her, the tension dissipating in the warmth of the moment. As they began to gather their things, Judge Thompson's voice called out to them once more. "Savannah, Iris," he said, drawing their attention back to the bench. "You two did such a good job today. I think you could stay and help me with another case. What do you say?" Savannah's eyes widened, and she shook her head vigorously. "We have to go feed our rabbits," she said, her tone filled with the kind of seriousness only a child could muster. The courtroom erupted in laughter, the lightheartedness of the moment breaking through the usual stiffness of the space. Judge Thompson laughed along with everyone else, nodding his head. "Well, feeding rabbits is very important work," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Thank you for your help today, ladies. You both did a wonderful job." Rachel took her daughters by the hand, and together they made their way out of the courtroom. The atmosphere was noticeably lighter, the smiles on the faces of those present a testament to the warmth that had filled the room. It wasn't often that a courtroom, a place usually associated with rules, judgment, and consequences, was transformed into a space of understanding and compassion. The rest of the courtroom attendees watched as Rachel and her daughters left, a sense of hope lingering in the air. It was a reminder that, sometimes, justice wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about understanding, forgiveness, and the willingness to give someone a second chance. And today, that reminder had come from the most unexpected of judges, a pair of young girls who saw the world not through the lens of rigid rules, but through the eyes of love and fairness. As Judge Thompson turned to the next case, he couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Moments like this were rare, but they were what made his job truly meaningful. It wasn't just about the cases, the rulings, or the laws. It was about the people, the lives behind each case, and the chance to make a real difference. And today, thanks to Savannah and Iris, He felt that they had done just that. The courtroom settled back into its usual rhythm, but the warmth of that moment lingered. Those who had witnessed it would carry a bit of that innocence and compassion with them, a reminder that sometimes justice was best served not by the strict adherence to rules, but by the simple, honest perspective of a child. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. "All right then, I think we're going to let your mom off with a warning this time. But Savannah, Iris, you have to promise me something. Make sure your mom is extra careful at those lights from now on, okay?" "Yes, sir," the girls said, their faces lighting up with excitement. Judge Thompson smiled and banged his gavel lightly. "Case dismissed. No fine today." A ripple of applause moved through the courtroom, and Rachel breathed a deep sigh of relief, her eyes misty with gratitude. She looked down at her daughters, pride filling her heart. They had managed to turn what could have been a stressful moment into a light-hearted and hopeful one. As Rachel began gathering her belongings, Judge Thompson called out to them again, "You know, Savannah and Iris, you've done such a good job today. I think you might have a future as judges yourselves. How about you stay and help me with another case?" He gave them a playful smile, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Savannah, with her typical seriousness, shook her head decisively. "We have to go feed our rabbits," she replied, her small voice carrying a resolute tone. The response was so earnest that the entire courtroom couldn't help but break into laughter, including Judge Thompson. "Well, feeding rabbits is very important work," he said, nodding approvingly. "Thank you for your help today, young ladies. You both did a wonderful job." He gave a final nod to Rachel, who smiled gratefully. Rachel took her daughters by the hand, and the three of them began to make their way toward the exit. The atmosphere in the courtroom was noticeably lighter than it had been earlier, with smiles lingering on the faces of those present. It wasn't often that a courtroom, a place usually dominated by seriousness and strict adherence to the law, was transformed into a space of warmth and compassion. The courtroom attendees watched as Rachel and her daughters left, a sense of hope lingering in the air. Many were still smiling, their hearts touched by the innocence and empathy of Savannah and Iris. It was a reminder to all of them that sometimes, justice is not only about enforcing the law, it is also about understanding, forgiveness, and extending a second chance to those who truly deserve it. Judge Thompson took a moment to gather himself before moving on to the next case. He looked out over the courtroom, a small smile still playing at his lips. He knew that moments like this were rare, but they were also what made his work truly meaningful. It wasn't just about rules and regulations. It was about the people, the lives behind each case, and the opportunity to make a real difference. He turned his attention to the next file in front of him, but the warmth of Savannah and Iris's innocent sense of fairness lingered. He felt lighter, more connected to the purpose that had brought him to this bench years ago. He cleared his throat and signaled for the next case to proceed, but there was a change in his demeanor, an added gentleness to his usual firm approach. As the next defendant stepped up, Judge Thompson spoke with a softness that hadn't been there before. The room, still imbued with the lightness from the previous case, seemed to carry that energy forward. Those who had witnessed the interaction with Savannah and Iris felt as though they had been part of something rare and beautiful, something that was bigger than just a ruling or a fine. The next case proceeded, but everyone, including Judge Thompson, carried a bit of the earlier moment with them. They carried the reminder that sometimes the law must be tempered with understanding, and that every once in a while, we need to see justice through the eyes of those who are innocent and pure of heart. The rigid structure of the law had been softened, if only briefly, by the simple honesty of two young girls. The day continued, but the mood had shifted. There was more patience in the proceedings, a little more compassion in the judge's voice. The people in the courtroom were no longer just bodies filling seats. They were human beings with lives, with loved ones, with stories. Judge Thompson understood that each case was not merely about right and wrong, but about choices, mistakes, and the possibility for redemption. When the afternoon session began, the air still carried the warmth of the morning. Rachel and her daughters had left, but their presence lingered, a testament to how even the simplest of moments could have a profound impact. It had been Savannah and Iris's honest assessment, their innocent understanding of what was fair, that had made everyone stop and think a little deeper about the true nature of justice. Judge Thompson knew that the law was often strict, sometimes unforgiving. But he also knew that moments like these, where fairness and empathy triumphed over the rigidity of rules, were what made justice truly meaningful. As he looked around the courtroom, he could tell that everyone else felt it too. The way they sat a little straighter, the way their faces softened. It was as if Savannah and Iris had reminded them all of something they'd forgotten. And so, the rest of the day continued, but not quite as before. Each case that followed was approached with a little more care, each defendant treated with a little more kindness. And in that small courthouse, for just a little while, the law and human compassion walked hand in hand. All thanks to two little girls who had taken their role as judges to heart and shown everyone the true meaning of fairness. Judge Thompson's day ended much like it had begun, with a stack of cases and a gavel in his hand. But as he left the courthouse that evening, he knew that this day would stand out in his memory. It was not because of the rulings he had made, but because of the lesson in fairness he had learned from two young girls who had come to court simply to support their mom. He hoped that he, and everyone else who had witnessed it, would carry that lesson forward. After all, sometimes it takes the innocence of a child to remind us what justice really means. After Rachel and her daughters left, the courtroom felt different, warmer, lighter, and filled with a renewed sense of compassion. Judge Thompson took a deep breath and turned his attention to the next case on the docket. He called forward Chantel Richards, a young woman who approached the bench with a bright smile, though her eyes betrayed a hint of nervousness. Judge Thompson offered her a reassuring nod. "Good morning, Chantel. Let's see what we have here today," he said warmly. Chantel stood with her hands clasped in front of her, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. She had been cited for almost running a red light but had managed to stop just in time. Judge Thompson clicked on the screen beside him, and the video footage of Chantel's car played. The courtroom fell silent once more as everyone watched her car approach the intersection at a brisk pace. The light switched from yellow to red, and it seemed, for a brief moment, as though Chantel intended to push through. But at the very last second, she made the decision to stop. Judge Thompson raised an eyebrow, his face betraying a hint of curiosity. He looked at Chantel with a question ready. "It looks like you almost went for it, but decided to stop at the last moment. Tell me, what was going through your mind right then?" Chantel's face flushed slightly, and she took a deep breath before speaking. "Honestly, Your Honor, I wasn't sure if I'd make it. I thought I might have enough time, but something in me said to stop, and I didn't want to risk it. I knew it was important to follow the rules, even if it meant being a bit late or inconvenienced. I figured it was better to be safe than sorry." Judge Thompson listened intently, nodding as she spoke. He appreciated her honesty. "That was a good call, Chantel," he said, his voice carrying a tone of gentle authority. "Sometimes, our first instinct is to push through, to take a chance even when we know it might not be the best idea. But it takes real courage to pull back, to stop, even if it means being late or causing an inconvenience. It means you were thinking beyond the moment, and that's what good judgment is all about." Chantel's posture relaxed, and a smile crept across her face. She had been so worried about being scolded or facing a harsh penalty, but the judge's words made her feel seen and understood. Judge Thompson continued, his eyes kind. "I think you did the right thing, Chantel. And because of that, I'm going to dismiss this case. We all make mistakes, but what matters is how we respond to them. You made a choice to correct yourself, and that speaks volumes about your character." Chantel's eyes widened in surprise, and relief washed over her. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much." She had come in expecting a fine and a lecture, but she was leaving with something much more valuable, a sense of validation and a reminder that it was okay to make mistakes, as long as she learned from them. Judge Thompson smiled at her warmly. "You're very welcome, Chantel. Remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about doing our best and making the right decisions, even when they're difficult. I hope today serves as a reminder to always trust your better judgment." He gave her a final nod, and with that, Chantel left the courtroom, her heart much lighter than it had been when she entered. As the door closed behind her, Judge Thompson took a moment to look around the courtroom. The atmosphere was still charged with the warmth of the earlier case with Savannah and Iris, and now Chantel's case had added to it, a reminder that justice wasn't always about punishment. Sometimes it was about recognizing growth, about encouraging people to be better, and about giving them the chance to redeem themselves. Judge Thompson knew that not every case could be handled this way. There were times when the law required strict enforcement, when rules had to be followed to the letter, and when consequences were unavoidable. But moments like these, when he could see the person behind the infraction, were what made his job worthwhile. He had the privilege of not only upholding the law but also guiding people toward making better choices. The courtroom settled back into its usual rhythm, but there was an undeniable shift in the energy of the space. People who had come in expecting a morning of stern rulings and rigid adherence to the law had instead witnessed something different, something softer, more understanding. It was a reminder to all present that the courtroom wasn't just a place for judgment. It was also a place for growth, for second chances, and for human connection. Judge Thompson called for the next case, but as he did, he couldn't help but glance at the empty spot where Chantel had stood just moments before. He hoped she would carry today's lesson with her, that she would continue to trust her instincts and make the choices that would keep her and those around her safe. He knew that, ultimately, that was the real purpose of the law, not to punish, but to protect and to guide. The next defendant approached the bench, and Judge Thompson straightened in his chair, his demeanor shifting back to that of a judge ready to hear another case. But inside, he still carried the warmth of the morning, the lightness that had been brought in by Savannah and Iris, and the quiet redemption of Chantel. These were the moments that reminded him why he had chosen this path. It wasn't just about rulings or verdicts. It was about people, about their lives, and about the opportunity to make a difference. And so, the day continued, case by case, each one different from the last, each one a chance to uphold the law while also recognizing the humanity of those who stood before him. Judge Thompson knew that he wouldn't always be able to offer a second chance, but he also knew that when he could, it mattered deeply. It was those moments that made the long hours and the difficult decisions worthwhile. As the afternoon sun began to filter through the high windows of the courtroom, Judge Thompson took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. Today had been a good day, a day of fairness, compassion, and redemption. And for Judge Thompson, that was the best kind of justice he could hope to deliver. As the courtroom settled down, Judge Thompson took a moment to address everyone present. He cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the room, and spoke in a voice that was both firm and compassionate. Today, we've seen two different situations where people made decisions that could have gone either way. What's important is that we learn from these moments and understand that the law isn't just about punishment. It's about fairness, growth, and understanding. He paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in. The people seated in the courtroom were silent, their eyes fixed on the judge, waiting for him to continue. Judge Thompson had a way of commanding attention without demanding it. His presence alone was enough. He smiled softly, his gaze falling briefly on the empty space where Rachel, Savannah, and Iris had stood earlier. Savannah and Iris reminded me that sometimes we need to be compassionate, even when the rules seem clear. They showed us that even in a place like this, a place of judgment and consequences, there is room for empathy. And Chantel showed us that it's never too late to make the right choice, even if it means admitting that our initial instincts were wrong. Life is full of these moments, small decisions that can make a big difference. Judge Thompson's eyes moved from face to face, his expression sincere. It's easy to get caught up in the strictness of the law, to see things in black and white. But justice isn't just about being right. It's about doing what's right. And sometimes, doing what's right means giving someone a second chance, recognizing their growth, and believing in their potential to be better. He looked at the attorneys, the clerks, the audience, everyone who had witnessed the events of the morning. I hope today's cases remind all of us of that. The law is here to protect us, but it must also guide us. It must also inspire us to be better, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. The courtroom was quiet. There was a profound stillness in the air, as though everyone present was processing not just the judge's words, but the emotions behind them. The atmosphere was one of warmth and understanding, a rare feeling in a place often associated with tension and judgment. Judge Thompson could see it in their faces, in the way they sat a little straighter, in the way their expressions had softened. It was as if the weight of the courtroom had lifted, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. Judge Thompson allowed the silence to linger for a moment before continuing. We're all human. We all make mistakes. What matters is how we respond to those mistakes, whether we choose to learn from them, to grow, to change. Savannah and Iris's innocence reminded us of the importance of compassion. Chantel's courage reminded us that it's never too late to choose the right path. He leaned back slightly, his eyes resting on a young man seated at the back of the room. The young man, who had come in with a sullen look, now seemed to be listening intently, his posture more open than it had been earlier. Judge Thompson smiled gently. There will always be times when the law requires firmness, when the rules must be followed to the letter. But there will also be times when the law can offer a helping hand, when it can lift someone up rather than bring them down. Judge Thompson's voice softened, his words carrying the weight of experience. I hope that's what you take away from today. The law is not just a set of rules. It's a guide, a way to help us all live together in harmony. It is here to remind us that every one of us has the capacity for change, for growth, for redemption. He paused again, this time with a reflective look in his eyes. The decisions we make, even the small ones, have the power to shape our lives and the lives of those around us. Savannah, Iris, and Chantel each made decisions today that reflected their character. They chose compassion, they chose courage, and they chose growth. That's something we can all learn from. The judge then turned his attention to the attorneys. As officers of the court, we have a responsibility to uphold the law. But we also have a duty to see the people behind the cases, to understand their struggles, to recognize their efforts to change. I challenge each of you to remember that in your work. He looked at the audience once more, his eyes lingering on each person as though speaking to them individually. And to everyone here today, whether you're here for your own case, to support someone else, or simply to observe, remember this. Justice isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's about striving to do better, even when it's hard. It's about lifting each other up, not just bringing each other down. Judge Thompson straightened, his face softening into a warm smile. I am proud of what I've seen here today. It gives me hope. Hope that justice can be fair and compassionate. Hope that people can learn and grow. And hope that we can all be part of making our community a better place. Let today be a reminder that second chances are worth giving, and that growth is worth encouraging. With that, Judge Thompson nodded, signaling the end of his address. There was a moment of stillness, then a quiet murmur of agreement spread through the room. People began to move, the proceedings ready to continue, but the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer just a courtroom. It was a place where understanding had taken root, where hope had been planted. As the gavel came down to signal the next case, Judge Thompson knew that today would remain in the minds of those present. It wasn't just about the decisions he had made or the words he had spoken. It was about the connections forged, the lessons learned, and the hope for a more compassionate justice system. And as he prepared for the next case, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Because, ultimately, justice wasn't just about laws. It was about people, and the belief that they could always strive to be better. Rachel left the courthouse with Savannah and Iris, her heart brimming with gratitude and love for her daughters. As they stepped out into the bright morning sunshine, she knelt down to their level, her eyes filled with emotion. She pulled them both into a tight hug, holding them close. You two were amazing today, she said, her voice a little shaky. You helped me more than you know. Savannah looked up at her mother with a smile that radiated pure innocence. We just told the truth, Mom, she said simply. And Judge Thompson was really nice. Iris, still excited by all the attention they'd received, nodded eagerly. And now we get to feed the rabbits, she added with a squeal of delight. Rachel laughed, the sound ringing with relief and joy, her worries about the morning melting away. She knew this was a day they'd all remember, not just for the nerves they'd felt walking into the courtroom, but for the lessons learned and the love shared. It was a day when her daughters got to see firsthand that even adults make mistakes, and that fairness and compassion can make all the difference. The three of them walked toward their car, hand in hand, the warmth of their bond filling the space between them. Rachel felt a sense of pride for her girls, who had faced the unknown and approached it with honesty and kindness. She knew that these were the moments that truly shaped their character. Moments when they learned that standing up, speaking out, and choosing compassion could change not just their own lives, but the lives of those around them. Back inside the courthouse, Judge Thompson stood at his bench for a moment, watching as the family left. A smile played on his lips, a soft expression that reflected the warmth in his heart. He loved moments like this, moments when justice wasn't just about the law, but about humanity. It reminded him why he had chosen this job in the first place. He knew that enforcing the law was important, but he also knew that the greatest satisfaction came from seeing the human spirit shine, from giving people a chance to grow and learn. The courtroom gradually returned to its usual rhythm. Papers shuffled, murmurs filled the air, and people moved to their next places. But something had changed. The warmth from that morning still lingered, like a gentle glow that refused to fade. The people who had witnessed the proceedings weren't just leaving with legal outcomes. They were leaving with something far more meaningful. They were taking with them a sense of hope, the belief that even in a world full of strict rules and consequences, there was always room for understanding, for second chances, and for the innocence of a child's perspective. Judge Thompson sat back down, taking a deep breath as he looked at the next case file. He knew that not every day in court could be like this one. There would be times when the law required firmness, when there was no room for leniency. But today had been a reminder that sometimes justice was about more than rules. It was about seeing the person behind the mistake, understanding their story, and giving them a chance to do better. He tapped his gavel lightly, signaling the beginning of the next case. But his mind lingered on Rachel, Savannah, and Iris. He hoped they would carry this experience with them. Not just the relief of a dismissed fine, but the understanding that fairness and kindness could make all the difference. He hoped that Savannah and Iris would remember how it felt to be heard, to be taken seriously, and that they would carry that confidence into every part of their lives. And he hoped that everyone who had witnessed that morning's events would carry the same lesson, that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about growth, about giving people the opportunity to learn from their mistakes, and about recognizing that the smallest voices can have the biggest impact. As the next defendant approached the bench, Judge Thompson straightened in his seat, his demeanor once again that of a fair but firm judge. But inside, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been a good day, a day where justice was served not just in the technical sense, but in the truest sense. A day when the innocence of two children had reminded everyone of what truly mattered: compassion, fairness, and the hope that people can always strive to be better. Rachel, Savannah, and Iris drove away, the courthouse disappearing in their rearview mirror, but the memory of the day etched firmly in their hearts. It had been a morning of justice, yes, but more than that, it had been a morning of innocence, of love, and of hope. And that, Rachel thought as she glanced at her daughters in the rearview mirror, was what made all the difference. The story of Savannah, Iris, and Rachel in Judge Thompson's courtroom serves as a powerful reminder that justice is not just about rigidly following the rules. It's about understanding the human stories behind each case. It's about teaching the next generation that while laws are important, compassion is what makes us truly just. Savannah and Iris's innocence allowed them to see their mother's situation without the biases or harshness that adults often bring. They saw the situation clearly, and their honesty helped everyone in the courtroom remember what fairness really means. Their willingness to change their minds showed that fairness is fluid, not fixed. It adapts to the circumstances and allows room for empathy. Meanwhile, Chantel's courage to correct her mistake, even when it would have been easier to press on, demonstrated accountability. It showed that growth comes from recognizing our errors and taking steps to do better. Judge Thompson's courtroom wasn't just a place of judgment that morning. It was a classroom, a place where everyone present learned something about fairness, kindness, and the value of giving others the benefit of the doubt. The courtroom became a space of learning where everyone, from the lawyers to the audience members, witnessed how justice could be served through compassion rather than punishment. Savannah and Iris's voices, full of innocence and truth, reminded the adults present of the humanity that sometimes gets lost amidst rules and regulations. Judge Thompson himself played a crucial role in creating this atmosphere of understanding. He saw an opportunity not just to rule on a case, but to teach a lesson about what justice truly means. He showed that being a judge isn't just about enforcing the law, it's about guiding people towards better choices, about lifting them up rather than simply handing down consequences. His decision to involve Savannah and Iris, to value their perspective, and to give Chantel a second chance made the morning special. It transformed the courtroom from a place of fear and consequences to one of hope and learning. The true value of justice lies not in strict adherence to laws, but in the balance of fairness and empathy. Savannah and Iris's innocent perspectives were a reminder of this balance, showing that even the smallest voices have the power to impact how justice is served. Chantel's willingness to change her course showed that growth is always possible, no matter the circumstances. In the end, justice was served that morning, not through punishment, but through understanding, compassion, and second chances. It left everyone with a sense of hope. It demonstrated that even in a world governed by rules, there is room for humanity, for kindness, and for forgiveness. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all, that true justice isn't about being right, it's about doing what's right. It's about giving people the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to be better.